Hey everybody, welcome back to the RTS Guided Programming Coaching Call. I'm Mike Tushir. I've got Mark Robb here with me today. He's going to be helping me out to answer some of your questions. Pretty good discussion planned for today. You guys are asking a lot of questions, more so kind of on the explanation end, not just nuts and bolts stuff about how to execute the workout. So that's good stuff. It helps to make things a little more interesting, and I'm glad to see that you guys are engaging more with the process as far as why are we doing things the way that we are and stuff like that. So without any further delay, let's go on and jump into some questions about executing the workout. First one is I deadlift sumo. Should the straight leg deadlifts in the program be done conventional or sumo or something else? The straight leg deadlifts that you do in the program should be done conventional. The only thing would be is that there's some reason that you can't do them conventional, but we'll just do them conventional. The intent is just for that to be kind of a general preparation type of exercise, not general preparation, but just further toward general on the specificity spectrum. So we're not looking for a lot of specific practice or anything like that. Just general development of the muscles, and whether you're a sumo or conventional deadlifter, a narrower stance straight leg deadlift is going to suit that purpose just fine, no problems. Kind of on a related note, we had another lifter who had a very similar question. He needs a substitute movement for straight leg deadlifts. He didn't really say why, so it's a little bit difficult to recommend a substitute exercise without knowing why, but just kind of off the top of my head, you could try Romanian deadlifts and see if that solves whatever problem it is that you're experiencing. You could also try various good mornings. Let's start with that. If neither Romanian deadlifts or good mornings are able to satisfy whatever need that is, let me know, and if you could give me a little more background, that would be really helpful as well. Mark, since you're here with us, do you have any kind of exercises that come to mind off the top of your head as a substitute for straight leg deadlifts? Kind of putting you on the spot, I guess, a little bit. All right, sorry about that, Mark. You can go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, personally, I feel the good mornings are a closer approximation for SLDLs. I love RDLs, but I think good mornings are closer to the stiff leg deadlifts.
Okay. Okay, so in your mind, in your experience, the good mornings stay truer to what you want out of that movement. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the RDLs, I feel those a lot in low glutes, high hamstring, good mornings, and the SLDLs I feel more in high glute and low back, just a little bit higher than RDLs. So that's the reason I say that.
Yeah, I mean, from where I'm standing, it's not enough of a difference to matter. What I mean is, like, if we have some reason that straight leg deadlifts are going to be a no-go, and again, it would be nice to know what the reasoning is for that. But yeah, based on what we're doing here, either one of those is going to fit the purpose. So if there's any more follow-up on that, let's hear some more from the lifter. But yeah, I'm with you, Mark. Kind of either one of those, but good mornings is probably a closer approximation in terms of keeping the low back heavily involved. But it's probably not enough to make a huge difference. Next question we've got says, should we calculate our estimated 1 rep max based off of training numbers or based off of meet numbers? You should definitely do it off of your training numbers, because your training numbers are basically what you have every week. So if you only base that stuff off of your competition numbers, then I mean you're not getting very many check-ins, and there's really no need to estimate 1RMs if you're doing competitions, you know. So the estimations can come from training, and that's kind of the whole idea there. We get nice progress checks each week, you know, to make sure that that we're progressing. You know, it's not perfect. It's an estimation, so not every week is going to be a trend upwards. But the overall trend, if you kind of zoom out and look at your overall progress over the course of a month, not even a month, but a few months, you should be progressing generally upwards. You know, and if you're not, then we need to look at it. It may not be a problem, but then again, it might be. Next question is, I'm fairly certain a set, if I'm fairly certain that a set was a higher RPE because I misgrooved it, should I base the following sets off of what it actually was or what it should have been? So let me just provide a little more context to that in case I missed anything from the email. If you are doing a set and you expect it to be an 8 RPE, and then you finish and you misgroove the last rep and it was actually a 9 RPE, what should you do on subsequent sets? Should you treat it like an 8 or should you treat it like a 9? You know, I mean, it was only a 9 because you misgrooved it, right? You should treat it as it actually was, like as you actually experienced it. So if you misgrooved it and it's a 9, then you should treat it like a 9. You shouldn't say, well, if I had done it better, if I got more psyched up, if this or that, then it would have been easier. You know, we can't do that. So we have to treat it as it actually was, and that also gives you some important information, right? So if you misgrooved it, there's probably a reason that you misgrooved it. Either your technical proficiency is just not there, or maybe you're getting tired, or you know, any number of things. So you need to treat it as it actually was. And I can't really think of too many instances where you wouldn't. The only thing that comes to mind will be, you know, if you really boned up your setup. You know, like you're supposed to, let's say you're doing squats and, you know, you walked it out and your stance was just way wider than it should have been. Okay, that's something that's correctable, and you might want to treat it a little bit differently, but those are fairly infrequent occasions, to be honest. That's all the questions that we had as far as executing the workout. Had a couple program modification questions. The first one up, we've got a lifter who does not have access to rack pins. So they can't do pin squats, can't do pin presses, and they're looking for substitute exercises. My go-to substitute exercises, or at least the ones that I'm going to suggest to you in this case, for pin squats, I would go ahead and turn those into box squats. And then for pin presses, I would turn those into half board presses. So go down to a hardware store, get yourself a small piece of like 3/4 inch plywood. So it's going to be very close to chest level. For all practical purposes, it's going to be at chest level. And you'll really pause it on the board, flex off onto the board, and push up. It makes it as close to the targeted exercises as we can get, you know. So box squats and box squats and half board presses are about as close as you're going to get to pin squats and pin presses, you know, without the use of pins. Now, if we're talking about pin presses, like if you need to do pin presses from mid-range or something like that, obviously you'll need to use higher boards, but that's going to be generally the substitution that you want to make. The reason that I decided, or that I'm recommending box squats rather than pause squats or something like that, is that we already have pause squats in the program, so I didn't want to, you know, double up on that exercise. It's still good to have a bit of variety, especially given this stage of training that we're in. We don't want to totally monotonize your training and do pause squats practically every week. So we'll keep a little bit of variety in there. Also, it's worth mentioning that some people have problems with box squats due to past injury or things like that. So if that's you, let me know and we'll get that taken care of as well. Mark, did you have any other ideas or suggestions for lifters who can't do pin squats or pin presses?
Yeah, the only thing I can think of as an alternative to pin squats might be if you don't have pins in a power rack, could use, if you have any kind of elevated platform to lower the weight onto and then back off of again, kind of like Blaine Sumner's platforms there.
Yeah, that's a good idea actually. If you're handy and you want to make some jerk boxes or something like that, you could do that. I've heard of people using things like sawhorses and stuff. I would be careful doing stuff like that. Just make sure that whatever you're doing, that it's going to stand up to the weight that you have, even if you drop it, even if something goes pretty terribly wrong. It's not going to roll and fall down and hurt somebody. Keep safety in mind whenever you start putting stuff together like that. But I'm sure that goes without saying, but I like to go ahead and say that stuff anyway. That's a good idea, though. I hadn't thought of implementing some jerk boxes or something like that.
I guess that would be true for pin presses as well. So.
Right. Well, and then as far as that goes, you may see some rack pulls later on in your program, and jerk boxes are going to come in real handy for that as well. A substitute for rack pulls is a lot harder to find. There's not as much there. There's no equivalent of a box squat or something like that for the deadlift. If you have rack pulls in your program but no power rack to do them out of, jerk boxes, they sure would be nice. So I'm not sure if you're into doing some woodwork or anything like that, but it might be a reasonably fun weekend project. I'm sure that there's some good plans for jerk boxes that you could find online. Of course, you just don't want to build like a little flimsy plywood box. That you need to probably put some time into figuring out what you need to build, but I don't know. I might do that when I get back to the States, to be honest. All right, so that's it for the program modification questions. Got a couple GPP questions this week. First one is I'm involved in an active profession. Basically, when I'm at work, I'm on my feet moving around all day. Do I need to do the cardio portion of GPP? How detrimental is it going to be if I don't do it? That's a tough question, right? So GPP is the first thing to go whenever we hit a busy patch or anything like that. If you have to cut something out of the program, I would prefer that you cut out the GPP work. How detrimental is it going to be? I don't know. It's difficult to say. Over the long term, it's not going to be good. We don't want to have kind of uneven development as lifters. We're not trying to totally neglect some portion of our development. So I think that doing the low intensity cardio stuff, I think it definitely has a benefit over the mid and the long term. Now, are you going to see some serious negatives to that, over the long term? I don't know. There's still a significant cardio portion to the training that we're doing anyway. You'll notice that early on, depending on which group you're in, you're probably seeing density training in the earlier stages. That's very specific energy system work that we're doing. That's got a really significant aerobic component to it. And the higher volume work and stuff like that. So you're going to get some aerobic development just from lifting weights. It's not going to be as much aerobic development as you would get otherwise. How detrimental is it going to be? That's really hard to say. It depends on a lot of things. Part of it depends on your aerobic background and just kind of your natural tendencies to either stay in pretty good aerobic shape or not. For myself, I tend to stay in pretty good aerobic shape, whether I'm not whether I'm training it or not. I mean, not excellent aerobic shape, but passable. Some people are definitely not like that. So it kind of depends on where you fall on that, and also depends on how physical your profession is. Like if we're talking about, cutting wood, if you're out there cutting wood, and then yeah, that's probably cardio enough. But I'm drawing a blank on what exactly you mentioned in your email. It struck me as a profession that's on your feet a lot, but not necessarily like high energy output, not like elevated heart rate, sort of activities. Now, if I'm wrong about that, then you may not have much to worry about. But if that's the case, if you're just kind of on your feet a lot, but not necessarily having an elevated heart rate as you go through your day, then it may not be as much aerobically developing. It may not be as good at developing you aerobically as you think. So just something to consider. You want to have reasonable aerobic development, and it helps us in a lot of ways. And the biggest way that it helps us is through recovery from session to session. If you have passable, I mean, we're not looking to be able to, run a 10K or anything. It's not like that. But if you have pretty good aerobic development, at least for a power lifter, then you'll be able to recover more easily from session to session. You'll be able to handle higher workloads and things like that, and that can lead to more progress over the long term. You'll have the extra capacity to do more work when more work is required, when that's what you need in order to continue improving. Mark, I know you and I talk quite a bit about your work, and I don't know how much you want to talk about it now, but how physical is the job that you do? I know that you spend a lot of time in a car, but surely there's a physical component to your work as well. How physical is that?
Well, it's fairly physical, I would say. I mean, I spend a fair amount of time, in chest waders or hip waders, slogging around in deep mud, which is fairly, definitely get your heart rate up.
Yeah.
So
do you find that keeps you fit enough, I guess, that you're not really struggling to complete workouts and stuff like that, or when you finish a set, you're not, out of commission for 10 minutes or something?
Well, no, I don't think that alone is enough, but I do also cut a lot of wood,
Mm-hmm.
So that's definitely raises the heart rate as well. I mean, that's on the weekends. I'm typically cutting quite a bit of firewood. I'll go for walks, which I find to be restorative and sort of cardio. I live, in the mountains, so hike up the mountain and back down and so forth. And I think those three things combined, the combination, are just overall activity level. I think certainly covers the cardio portion.
Yeah, so you're not talking about the need for, super high outputs, like interval sprinting or anything like that. It's not like your heart rate needs to be maxed out, but fairly elevated, enough to where you're probably panting a bit, but still could keep a conversation if you needed to. Heart rate probably in the 130s, maybe 140s is what we're looking for if you're going to strap a heart rate monitor on. But kind of in that range for a bit of a prolonged period of time. Like what Mark is talking about is actually going to be a fair bit of aerobic work, especially if you take it in the context of, all of it over the course of, weeks. So I think we've kind of hammered that home enough, so hopefully that gives you some background on making a decision as far as how much of a priority do you need to put on the energy system work. I will say that, just to reiterate, if you come up on a busy patch, you're going to have to cut something out. cut out the GPP work. It's okay to miss that stuff for a while. You just don't want to make a habit of never doing it. So next question, GPP related, is which heart rate monitor do you recommend for GPP work? Basically, any heart rate monitor is going to work just fine as long as it has a chest strap. The heart rate monitors where you have to put your fingers on the watch surface and it measures your pulse from your fingers are really not accurate. So you need something with a chest strap that's gonna be more accurate. That's gonna get what you need. I've also seen just recently a watch that has some lights built into it, and it will measure your pulse from your wrist. I haven't played with those. They're a bit pricey, a lot more pricey than the chest strap monitors, but they're neat. So if you really don't like fooling around with the chest strap and you're looking for something else, then that might be something worth looking into. We have some kind of miscellaneous questions. We'll get into those now. First one is, I've got anterior shoulder pain when I'm doing rows. What should I do? This is a bit of an odd one. Okay, so normally as powerlifters we don't see anterior shoulder pain when you're doing rows. We hear about it more often when you're doing bench press. And this brings me to another point as far as stuff that's injury related. It pretty quickly gets out of my depth. So my expertise is really centered more in programming, program design, and periodization, and to some extent technical coaching, stuff like that. When we start talking about injuries, I lose that expertise pretty rapidly. And anterior shoulder pain when you're doing rows really goes outside of that. So I'm going to recommend that you get that checked out by somebody who knows more what they're talking about than me. That may be a doctor, if you have a chiropractor that you trust or something like that, some sort of physical therapist. Get them to take a look at it. Get them to see if they can figure out what's going on. Don't wait on it. It's better to handle injuries and stuff like that assertively, rather than wait around, and the thing lingers forever. So Mark actually has a lot more experience regarding injuries and stuff like that than I do. Does any of that anterior shoulder pain when you're doing rows, does that really ring any bells for you, Mark?
Well, not the only thing I could think of is possible, lat attachment, and I mean, proximal. Well, I guess it'd be distal lat attachment. But anyway, yeah, I agree with what you said about seeking somebody that knows what they're doing to try to figure out what the problem is. If it's just more of an annoyance, then a lot of times, I get stuff like that, and I got to basically try to tease out what's going on, what muscles are involved, because usually if a muscle's involved, say if it's lat involved in this case, then the whole muscle is involved, obviously, not just the attachment to the humerus. So if you got other stuff going on elsewhere in the muscle, then that's probably a pretty good indicator that that's what the problem is. But shoulders are complex. When you say anterior shoulder, that could mean a lot of different things. So
yeah, that's true.
I agree with you that it's probably better to try to find somebody that really knows shoulders and try to at least get some sort of a diagnosis, and then you can figure out how to treat it.
And also, to go along with that, a general safe bet is to avoid doing things that cause you pain. So if rows are causing pain, then you need to not do that, at least until you figure out what's going on. I would avoid painful movements. It hurts for a reason, and a lot of times as lifters we are kind of indoctrinated into this no pain, no gain mentality. in some cases that's true, but in the case of injuries, I really shy away from that. Yeah, I would avoid the things that hurt, at least until you know what's going on for sure. All right, next question we've got, I'm taking rest periods of up to 10 minutes towards some of the last down sets. Is that normal, or is it something I should focus on fixing? My first question, kind of a return question on that, is do you have to take such long rest periods? Like, is it necessary to rest for 10 minutes just to complete the workload, or is it that, by the end you're tired, you maybe don't feel like getting back under the squat bar so quickly? So basically, do you have to take such long rest periods, or is it more that you want to take such long rest periods? If you have to, that's going to be a different thing. If it's just that basically you want to and you have the time and it's not a big deal, then go ahead. But I'm assuming since you're writing in that there's more to it than that. Now, if it's that you have to rest that long in order to complete the workload, so like if you went back and tried your last set at 7 minutes instead, that you might miss a rep. That would be not good. That would be something worth working on. A 10-minute rest period is really long, and I mean, I say that I take 10-minute rest periods on occasion. I still don't like it. I still should do better than that. That's what some of the specific conditioning work is meant to address. It's meant to get us moving a bit faster so that we can take shorter rest periods and maintain high quality performance. So don't skimp on stuff like the aerobic development work. Don't skimp on stuff like the density training and stuff like that. That will help you get shorter rest periods. Also, it may be worth just kind of pushing things a little bit. So let's say that you generally need a 10-minute rest period on that last set. If you can push it to 9 minutes for a while, and it might make things a bit more difficult or something like that, but if you can push it to 9 minutes for a little while, once you make that adaptation, then you can go to 8 minutes, and you can kind of work your way down to a more normal sort of rest period. Now, it's always going to be a little bit longer toward the end, or pretty much always going to be a little longer toward the end as you get tired. Yeah, so I would take your time and kind of work that down over some months is probably what it will take. You could drop the weight and cut your rest period down right now, but I think that's unnecessary. I think kind of taking your time, continuing with a strength focus, but just kind of allowing your conditioning to catch up to your strength level over some months is probably going to be better for your more short-term strength development. So that's kind of how I would approach that if I were you. If that doesn't answer your question, feel free to type something in, raise your hand, and we can talk about it some more. Mark, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Well, I agree with what you're saying about the GPP work. That's why why we do it, is to be able to do the work and get the work done in a timely fashion, be fit enough to do that. And then the second thing is just keeping in mind that the down sets are fatigue sets. I mean, we're trying to reach a certain level of fatigue, and so I try to push them and not push them time-wise, and not allow myself to recover too much, because the point is to become fatigued. That was pretty much
Okay, yeah.
My comment about that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree with those thoughts. Yeah. Next question we've got, I've got some torn cartilage in my wrist. No low bar back squats, no presses for me for the next 4 to 6 weeks. I can still deadlift and I can still do rows and other pulling movements. So the question is, what adjustments should I make to my training, to my squat training or my deadlift training? For that, I wouldn't necessarily change a whole lot. Now I know you're not going to be benching, but I wouldn't add a whole lot of lower body stuff just because of that, especially since this is going to be more of a temporary thing. 4 to 6 weeks sounds like midterm, but really when you look at it in context, it's pretty short term. So it's going to be a short break for you. So just focus on quality of work in your squat and your deadlift training. Now, also, I understand that you can't do low bar squats, and that's going to put a damper on the squat work that you can do. So you need to make some adjustments there, and I know you mentioned what a lot of that was in your training, talking about doing a safety squat bar work, safety squat bar front squats, even doing some high bar back squats, stuff like that. If you can do that stuff without pain, and I understand that you're already talking to doctors and therapists and stuff like that, so if they're clearing you, then yeah, I would definitely do high bar back squats. I would also definitely do safety bar squats. Definitely make whatever modifications that you need to make, but train as much as you can. That's going to be better than not training by a long shot. Yeah, I wouldn't add a whole lot of extra work. As far as other upper body stuff like shoulder raises and things like that, if you're clear to do it and you want to do it, then yeah, I would definitely do it. You're not going to do enough shoulder raises, I think, that it's going to seriously impact your bench training for weeks after it's over. I would do some, spend a little bit of time on it. It will help you maintain that strength, maintain the muscle mass, which is very important. So yeah, go ahead, do stuff like that. If you can do stuff like shoulder raises or flies or cable crossovers, I mean, whatever is available to you, do it. Try to stick as true to the program as possible, but also within the bounds of what you're able to do medically. Kind of final question as part of this, I've heard that I can hit a bench PR by only doing rotator cuff work for these weeks. What do you think about that? And I've heard this before, and it sounds cool, but I mean, I've never seen anything like that. I've never seen somebody just not it's not just avoiding the bench press, it's avoiding any kind of pressing at all for a substantial period of time, and then come back and automatically hit a PR. I've heard the story. I've never seen it or seen anything close to that happen. So, I mean, from where I sit, I wouldn't count on it. But you can also look at it like this. You're going to be out for 4 to 6 weeks. That's a reality for you. So if you can do external shoulder rotations and maybe hit a PR at the end, hey, why not? It's not like you have another alternative at this point. Now, if you were healthy and you were asking me, hey, should I bench or should I not bench and do shoulder rotations, I would say definitely bench. But since that's not an option for you, go ahead, throw some external shoulder rotation work in there. I mean, what have you got to lose? Now, you're already getting a fair amount of that with the different rows and the other exercises that you're going to be doing. So, keep that in mind. But yeah, I mean, it's not going to hurt. Mark, before I move on from that, any other ideas for this guy with his wrist injury?
No, you pretty much covered everything I had thought of.
All right, yeah. It's good. We tend to be on the same page with stuff like that. Kind of keeping with our injury theme going on right now, we've got a lifter who's experiencing some knee tendinitis. Pain generally flares up when squatting over 60% weights. The question is, should I just squat less than 60% weights and do stuff like tempo work, or should I take time off entirely? I'm going to kind of choose an answer in the middle for this one. Tendinitis is an overuse injury, and in order for that to recover, it needs to have time to heal. So if squatting 3 days a week got you into this mess, then doing lighter squats 3 days a week probably isn't going to allow you to heal up very much. So we want to have an opportunity for you to heal. And for an injury like this, I think a reduction in frequency and training volume it's going to be a necessity. Now, what I do think you could do, squat as heavy as you can, pain-free, with minimum volume, minimum volume, minimum frequency. So like maybe once a week, work up, go as heavy as you can, but then stop. Like whether that's even if that's like a 60% single or even 60% for 5 or something like that, as long as that's not causing pain, I would think you could do that once a week. That will slow down your recovery a bit, but it's going to help you maintain your strength levels quite a bit. So to me, the trade-off there is it might delay you a little bit, but your strength won't drop off as much. And as you recover, as you heal up, that 60% might become 70% or something like that. But the idea is that you have to keep the volume bare minimum, and you have to keep the frequency low as well. Now, if you do this and you try it, and in, let's say, 2 weeks, there's no noticeable difference, then you need to revisit this idea and probably take time off entirely. Because we're going into this with the assumption that just simply reducing the volume, reducing the frequency is going to be enough. And that's kind of how we have to do this with injuries and stuff like that. If we're going to try to work around it, we kind of have to try it and see if your particular injury is going to cooperate or not. If it doesn't cooperate, then of course we got to change something. But that's how I would go about it. I would see if you can do a minimum amount of work and still recover. If you can, then great. If you can't, then we'll need to find a new plan. But avoiding pain, avoiding aggravating that injury is going to be very important. And Mark, I know that you've got maybe more experience than me with tendinitis and tendon irritation type of injuries. What can you add to this?
Well, all I can add to it is that what you're suggesting works because we've been through this, a number of times, several times, and in trying to heal up injuries I've had, and that's pretty much how we've gone about it, and I think that's what's necessary.
Yeah, I mean, I did the same thing with my hip injury last fall. I tried to do some minimal workloads and maintain my strength, and it just wasn't happening. So I'm doing these minimum workloads. My strength is dropping, just not super fast or anything. Now, for me and my injury, it was still too much, and I had to back off even more to the point where I basically wasn't doing anything, and then eventually it healed up. But it took me quite a long time to dig myself into that hole. Hopefully you're addressing this a bit sooner, and it's worth a try to see if you can do some minimum workload and continue to heal up. Like Mark, it's worked for me for other injuries, but I'm just kind of telling that story as a way to say we've got to try it and see. All right, so kind of the last miscellaneous question here. We've got how do I decide my bench grip width, and how do I go about performing the bench in the most optimal way for long-term progress? That's a big question. As far as grip width, I would start out at slightly outside of shoulder width, maybe a little bit more. What you want is that when you're at the bottom of the bench, you want your forearms to be vertical in every direction, basically viewed from the head, viewed from the side. You want your forearms to be vertical. From there, I would try to move it gradually outward, gradually wider. If your strength improves and your shoulders are tolerating it just fine, then stick with the wider grip. If your strength doesn't improve, then go back to the narrower grip. But generally, people will find that a wider grip results in more strength. So I would just kind of walk my way into a ideal grip width. And now I know that maybe doesn't sound great. It would be better if I said, hey, here's a formula and you can determine your ideal grip width right now. But none of those work, frankly. So I think it's really not that much to ask to take 6 weeks, 8 weeks, heck, even 12 weeks or something like that to gradually find your most ideal grip width. And it could possibly take a bit longer than that. But over the course of your career, assuming that you keep doing this for years, 6 weeks, 12 weeks, even 15 or 20 weeks, it's just not that much time. You'll look back on that in a year or something, and you'll be much stronger because you found your ideal grip width. And it's just not time lost. So be patient, work your way into that ideal grip width. As far as finding, what's the way to perform the bench for ideal and optimal long-term progress, that's kind of a sticky question, and maybe a better way to address that would be if you could take a video of your current bench press, send that in. We'll do a technical analysis on it. If you're doing things correctly, then great, there won't be a whole lot to see. But if you're not, then that would be probably the best way to go about fixing anything like that. Also, kind of a related question to that, how much should I tuck my elbows? How low do you want to touch your chest? I can tell you that you want to touch your chest kind of the bottom of your pecs. That is generally a good go-to place. But as far as how much to tuck your elbows, how much is too much, well, that gets really difficult. So sending in a video is going to be the best way to address that. And speaking of sending in videos, now is the time we're going to take a look at a couple videos. So first up, we're going to look at a squat video. So I'll be quiet while we watch this video, but the question is related to the bar being uneven and whether or not that needs to be fixed. So something to pay attention to as you watch this video. Watch that the bar is uneven, and let's see if we can find a way to address that, or if it even needs to be addressed. Okay, so we got to take a look at that. I'm going to see if I can get us back to the kind of toward the end so we can see the spinal position. Okay. All right, when I look at that video, one thing I notice, it's not really related to the bar being uneven, but I notice that your right foot is turned out a lot more and looks to be further back than your left foot. So just take some extra care to make sure that your stance is even and that your setup is how you want it to be. As far as the bar being uneven, it looks like it's just sitting uneven. It looks like it's kind of below your rear delt on the right side and above your rear delt on the left side. I'm not sure if it's sliding during your set or what, but it really looks to me like a placement issue. Mark, did you see something different than I see?
Oh, no. I mean, it's kind of hard to see from the video, you know, from the distance. But yeah, I agree with you about the stance, the bar placement. Well, I know a lot of athletes, um, you know, right-handed athletes especially, have one shoulder, the right shoulder is lower than their left. That's just, I mean, if you talk to a tailor, they'll tell you, hey, everybody on the football teams, their shoulders, right shoulder's lower than their left. So that could be something to take a look at. Um, might be the reason, might be, like you say, bar placement. I don't know. Just kind of, in my mind, just kind of have to figure out, you know, tease out what's going on. Might be a little combination of things.
Something else to be addressed here. It looks like you're kind of more or less just chilling as far as your grip on the bar. It looks like your hands are mostly draped over top of the bar. Now it could be just the video quality or whatever that, you know, maybe that's not actually the case. Just make sure that you're gripping the bar. I would even try a thumbs around grip. That might help you be a little bit more even and be a little bit more in control of the bar. Give it a shot. See if your wrists, elbows, shoulders can tolerate that. Yeah, it would be worth a try.
One other thing, Mike, now that you mentioned the grip on the bar, it looks like to me his right elbow is back further
Yeah,
than
it's
the
hard to see, with the black on black, but yeah, I maybe can see that.
yeah, and which would cause the bar to be, you know, in a little bit different position. So that's something you might want to take a look at too, and try to, you know, make sure that you're even.
Yeah, that's worth saying as well, and also something that's probably obvious, probably too obvious that we overlook right away is make sure that the bar is placed evenly on your back. Make sure that it's centered. I mean, I can't see the center knurl from the video, but it's just something else to think about. Having the bar off center would cause one side to sag as well. So just something to think about. So there's a few ideas there. Give it a shot, see what sticks. Send another video. We'll get this taken care of. A lot of times technical issues are like that. It takes a little bit to figure them out, but we'll get it. We've also got another video, same lifter. We're going to watch bench press. Okay, I'm going to pause it right there because I think this is what we're looking for. Again, the question is that the bar seems to be uneven and whether or not this is something that needs to be fixed. So again, we're looking at a bar that's, this time we're sagging a little bit on the left side, the lifter's left. So what could be the cause of this? And again, it's hard to see, but it looks like there's some asymmetry in your foot position and in the way that your hips are set. Now that's going to happen. Like Mark was just saying with the Taylor example. People have asymmetries. Everybody has asymmetries, and that's not necessarily a problem. What I see in this video for your bench press is it's not something I would be overly concerned about. And to be honest, as I'm watching it's even as it comes off your chest, and it's only at the lockout that we kind of see that left side sag a little bit. And I'm wondering if it could be something as simple as a shoulder mobility difference. It could be a setup thing, like maybe there's an asymmetry in the way that your shoulders are set up, the same way that there is in the way your feet are set up. So those would be some things to consider. The one on the bench doesn't seem nearly as bad, though. So just some things to think about. Mark, did you have any thoughts on the bench video?
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you on everything you said, and I would just add to that that what you might do is do some shoulder mobility testing and just see where your range of motion is on internal rotation and external rotation and so forth, because you might, without testing it, you don't know. It's not obvious, but when you start testing something like that, then it's like, holy cow, this arm is way different, or this shoulder is way different than the other one, and that gives you something. Then you know what the problem is, or know what the cause is, and can address it, or work on it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. That's a good point, that anytime it comes to mobility type stuff, testing it is a good way to go. It's a good general practice. All right, so that's it for the videos for this week. So let's head back over and answer a couple more questions. All right, so next question, kind of explanation type stuff. Last week we went from 3 down sets to this week with just 1 down set. So I'm wondering why there was such a drop in volume. Basically, the reason the volume dropped, that's just kind of a normal part of volume modulation. The volume is going to wave up and down through different stages of training, depending on the length of the block, which block it is, which time of year we're in, a bunch of different things, what caliber lifter we're talking about. So we're going to modulate this training volume, and the reason we do that, we're trying to build your capacity to tolerate work. So the higher volume work is going to, of course, build strength because it's a lot of work, and that's primarily what we're interested in. But we need to think about this from a long-term development standpoint as well. We can't just do, max recoverable volume all the time. That's not something that develops us as lifters. The thing is that you can do more than maximum recoverable volume. You can overreach a bit. Now, a lot of people go to overreaching as a way to, enhance strength or peak their strength, and I know that works for some. It's not been something that's worked well for me or my lifters. The reason that we do it is more as a work capacity development thing. All right, so if you think of work capacity like any other sort of fitness quality, any other sort of conditioning type of quality, the way that you would get better work capacity is by doing more work. The trouble is, doing more work is more than you can tolerate. So you can't just blanket do more work all the time because you can't recover from that. So we'll have periods of higher volume work where the lifter is going to get a little bit beat up. And then we'll have other periods of lower volume work that are going to allow you to recover from that. Now, that's one aspect of volume modulation. The other aspect of volume modulation, it helps keep us responsive to the training load. We don't want to do maximum volume all the time because you adapt to that super high level of volume, and then what? Then what do you do in terms of long-term development? So it's both developmental over the long term to modulate your volume, but it's also developmental in the short term in that it helps us to continue progressing on more normal levels of volume without having to reach into the bag for those super high volumes, super high frequencies, and stuff like that. I know that stuff sounds cool, especially to more intermediate level lifters. It sounds like a fast track method, but it's really not. It's, in my opinion, it short circuits you in terms of your long-term development. I think having a patient outlook where you develop yourself as a lifter over a long period of time, I think that's the best way, and that's how this program is set up and designed. So yeah, hopefully that answers that question as far as why the volume modulates, and we can I would definitely be happy to talk more about that. That's an interesting topic to me. Next question we've got, I'm peaking for a competition on April 12th, and so at the time of this call, that's going to be in about 10 days, give or take a bit. The lifter says, I'm curious as to why we're doing so much volume in training at this point. So this is the last, what I would consider to be the last training week. Now the volume as a whole has dropped. It may not seem like it's dropped, but it definitely has, and the intensity has gone up. Now the volume hasn't dropped a lot because the way that you're prepared through this program, your work capacity gets pretty high. And when your work capacity gets high like that, you don't need a long taper. And that's good because, one, it's less time for you to mess something up in the taper. Tapers are generally tough to get right anyway. So having less time to mess it up is generally a good thing. But on the positive end, it's more time for you to really push your training and more time for you to build your strength. So you're going to come into the meet. You'll come into the meet well recovered, in good shape, and you don't need 2-3 weeks in order to make that happen. So what you can expect, and we've talked about this at more length in past calls, so it might be worth kind of going back through the breakdowns in the forum to see where we talked about contest training, meet week training. So what you can expect for next week, generally you'll have probably 2 workouts. You'll have the first workout, which will still be fairly heavy, but the volume is super low. And then the second workout, which is more or less just going through your warm-ups. So there's a lot of rest, very low volumes. It's generally a pretty easy week, although don't think of it like it's not blow-off training. It's still training. So when you go in to take your openers, you still need to approach it like you would any other period in your training. So, hey Mark, I'm going to get your thoughts on this. So you've done a number of different tapers with me in the past. Any advice for these guys as far as what they can expect, how they should approach it mentally or anything?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you're saying as far as keeping the volume up and so forth. I just, as far as approaching it mentally, it's kind of, to me, it's kind of almost a subconscious thing. I just seem like I become more focused, and I think that's something that's really important is what you're doing, not only while you're lifting and doing your sets, trying to do each rep perfectly. Like they say, perfect practice makes perfect. So that's I think that's critical. A few days of not lifting and you start to become rusty. So I think it's very important that everything you do as perfectly as you possibly can. In other words, just practicing. And then the other thing is what you're doing between your sets. If you're talking about some unrelated subject to somebody or socializing, whatever, that's not focused. I try to stay focused between the sets, try to think about, debate in my mind sometimes for a couple of minutes about whether to put 5 more pounds on or not. And it makes a difference because, 5 pounds a week or something like that, that's a big deal. It adds up over time. So just where your mental focus is, I think, whatever you focus on is going to expand. And if you don't focus on your lifting, then you're sort of derailing yourself.
Okay, yeah, good, definitely good advice. Some stuff that you guys can take away and apply to the tapers that you have coming up. We have a couple more questions. I'm going to burn through these real quick because we're running a bit out of time, but I don't want to leave anything off. So next question is, how many weeks long are the accumulation, transformation, and realization blocks for this training cycle? Well, we're not using a pure block periodization model for this training cycle, so the length of each block is going to vary. It's going to depend on when your competition is. It's going to depend on, you know, the level of lifter that you are, the kind of strategy that we're employing, and, you know, a number of different things like that. However, we're not using a pure block model, so things like accumulation, transformation, and realization, that's not the kind of things that you'll see. Like you won't see a pure accumulation block. What we're doing blends more, you know, more vertical integration style periodization into it. So I mean, of course, with that approach, there's a strong block influence, but it's not a purely block approach. And because of that, and because I've kind of tweaked things a bit, I don't even use the accumulation, transformation, realization terminology anymore, because I don't feel like that's fair. You know, Isherin has these terminologies that describe you know, certain training blocks, and that's how he recommends that you do it. Well, we're not doing that, so I feel like you know, it's not really fair for me to call it these specific names when it's not that. So generally, you can count on them being 3 to 5 weeks long. They'll almost always be at least 3, and very seldom be longer than 5 weeks. All right, and the last question we've got for today, many people I know advocate taking breaks after a contest, a week to 2 week breaks. This time we didn't take one. My estimated 1 rep maxes have gone up quite a bit since the competition. So I'm curious as to what the reasoning is. Why didn't we take a break? You know, why do we not do that? Basically, I don't have long breaks after most contests because you don't need them. I mean, it's basically what you experienced at the end of this training cycle. You know, so you do the meet, and if you're in good shape, the meet, frankly, isn't that hard. It's only 9 repetitions. You know, the only times that meets seem to really trash lifters that are in good shape are if they have, you know, more than normal missed attempts, or if they have to get really psyched up if the competition itself is very stressful. So if it's like a huge meet, if it's a very important meet to you mentally, then you'll probably see more stress come from it and probably need more of a break afterwards. If it's, you know, more of a normal meet, if you're coming in good shape, if you make a lot of attempts, then chances are that you'll be fine. You know, so since the volume is so low in a competition, almost all of the stress comes from your mental approach to it. So how much psychological stress is involved in the competition? The more psychological stress, you know, the more trash you're going to feel the next day or just after the contest. And the more time it's going to take for you to start feeling normal again. Now, if you come in good shape, you make a lot of attempts, you know, I mean, the competition, it's always going to be stressful, but as long as, you know, it's not super stressful, then chances are you'll be able to step right back into training afterwards. You might have to drop 1 session, maybe 2 sessions, but you can get back into training pretty quickly right after a contest. And I think that's important in order to keep that momentum going. So, Mark, have you pretty much found the same thing? I think we take a little bit more time for you, but that's just kind of an individualization thing to help with recovery, right?
Well, it's I agree with everything you just said. I think it's a component or you know, it has to do with how stressful the meet and the whole, you know, like going to South Africa last summer. For me, that was a big deal, you know, in a stressful event, international travel to South Africa and so forth. So that kind of wrecked me. You know, if a normal deload before or a taper into a meet, and a meet is actually pretty easy. You know, like you said, it's pretty much, I mean, the volume's reduced, the intensity's generally pretty reduced, the stress level the week prior to the meet's reduced. So next week, you know, can charge right back into it and just, you know, pick up momentum again immediately. So I think it's really a function of the stress going into the meet and the week before the meet.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And yeah, I mean that's a big part of it as well. So like if you consider, you know, your overall stress level from training, you know, that deload week before the meet, that's supposed to allow all that stress to dissipate in order for you to perform well at the meet. So basically, the only stress that you should be dealing with at that point, you know, is the stress from the competition. Of course, nagging injuries and whatnot are not included in that. And if you have a lot of stuff like nagging injuries, then you may need to take more time off. And to that end, you'll notice that there will be competitions that we'll have in our annual plan that will have more of a transition phase afterwards, where we will get away from, you know, hardcore powerlifting training. It won't be quite so hardcore for a few weeks, and that's, you know, by design. That's because we had a big peak, and we're trying to restore certain aspects of your physiology, get you ready for the next annual plan, you know. So you'll notice that this stuff will modulate as we go throughout the year. But for now, especially given that where we are in the annual plan, there wasn't a big need for a taper after the last competition. We'll take a little bit more of a taper probably after this competition. I'll see how you guys are doing as we get a little bit closer. But yeah, we may take a little bit more of a taper after this next competition. But yeah, in general, even when we do take a taper, it's not much. You know, we may reduce the training by a session or two, but it won't be, you know, a giant deload. There won't be a time where I say, all right, don't come to the gym for 2 weeks. You know, you may have to do that for various reasons in your life, but that's never a training decision that I'm going to make. So I think that's about all that we've got for today. So as usual, just want to thank you guys for hanging out. Those of you who were here with us for the live call today, I appreciate you hanging around. Always appreciate having you guys around. So thanks for watching. Check the calendar for next week's call time. I'm pretty sure it's on Tuesday. It's been on Tuesday for quite a while. It seems to be working all right. So check the calendar. If you have any questions, send them my way. Make sure to you know, take what's there, build some momentum this week. Good luck with your training. We'll catch you next time.